whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. Those of us joining from Alberta are on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 6, 7, and 8 territories, and all of us are beneficiaries of these peace and friendship treaties, and the Alberta Craft Council is dedicated to ensuring that the spirit of these treaties are honored and respected. So thank you all for joining us today. Just gonna pull up my notes. So this is part of our Monday Meetup series, and we're really happy to have Allison here with us today to talk about craft as a therapeutic tool for mental health. Allison obviously has a wealth of personal and professional experience using craft and art for mental wellness, and is here to share some of that with us today. Tools that we can use to benefit our own mental health, as well as practical suggestions for overcoming some of the challenges that we face as creators, particularly during these trying times that we're in. Allison has a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Alberta and a graduate diploma in art therapy from Vancouver's Art Therapy Institute. Allison currently works part-time with Community Mental Health Action Plan, and it's a group of service providers and stakeholders who are working to try and improve mental health and addiction services in our community through collaboration and evidence-based research. So I'm sure many of us in the craft practitioner field have maybe seen evidence of some of this in our own practices, but Allison, I really appreciate that this is backed with evidence-based research. Allison works primarily in cross-stitch embroidery and also multimedia and painting as well. She received the Alberta Craft Council's Award for Early Achievement in 2018 for her significant contributions to Alberta's fine craft culture, and we were not alone in our thinking that year. She was also awarded the Edmonton Artist Trust Fund Award from the Edmonton Arts Council that year and selected for a year residency at Harcourt House Artist Center. So thank you so much for Allison joining us today. I can't wait to hear what you have to share. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm really excited. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and I think Jenna and Saskia had said that we're going to send out the PowerPoint presentation at the end of this to people who are here. So if you don't like taking notes or want a reminder of things that I've said, we will be sending it your way, so don't worry about that. So let me share my screen now. Hooray. And I will head over here to actually put myself in a slideshow. Hooray. All right, can everybody see that? Yeah, thumbs up? Great. So I'm gonna move on. So we're gonna start talking about craft as therapy. Thank you, Jenna, for the really nice introduction. Like she said, I have a background in fine arts and in art therapy. So both of those have contributed to my practice, both as an artist and as an art therapist. So it's really interesting. I like to combine all that together and really work on my own mental health and helping others in non-traditional ways with craft and art to benefit mental wellness and all sorts of things like that. So let's move on. Let's start. So what I want to first get out of the way is some expectations about what do we even mean by therapy. So therapy isn't just talking about your problems or your trauma or your worst days. It can take a lot of different forms and have different purposes. So it can be talking about your traumas for sure, but it can also be building skills, trying to process some of the things that you've done in your life, or process to become not a new person, but overcome some of the challenges that you may have faced in your life. And sometimes it's just about mediating and managing some of the things that we deal with in our everyday life. Sometimes there's not cures for everything. And we just have to try and make it a little bit better even. So when talking about therapeutic interventions, we're not necessarily saying that craft is going to fix all your problems. I can't promise that. That is beyond my scope. What I can say is that for a lot of people, craft and craft practices, whether it's fine craft or very basic hobby crafts or anything like that, it can be really beneficial to manage, mediate, and treat some of the mental health issues that we have in our society, some of the conflicts and some of the challenges that we face, even if it's not mental health related. So the content of this webinar has come both from my professional training as an art therapist and my work. I actually did an artist in residence session with the YES, with the Youth Empowerment Support Services, used to formerly the Youth Emergency Shelter, and have worked with street involved and homeless youth for about 5 years now, and in various capacities and different roles. And I've found that working with craft and art has been a really, really key tool to my work. So with that, I also come from a background of personal experience. I don't like to shy away from talking about this. I used to, but I come with my own issues. I have an anxiety disorder that I've struggled with for a lot of my life, and a lot of why I came into doing this work is because of my own history and my own challenges. So again, some of the things I talk about, they're going to be different for every person, and what works for me may not work for you, and we have to be aware of that and, you know, limit our expectations as to whether things are going to work the same way for every person. So just so we're on the same page there. So I've chosen to illustrate this webinar with my own art because I have copyright and I'm allowed to share that. So I didn't want to overstep and share other people's art when it's not appropriate or speak for them about some of the therapeutic benefits of it, because that's hard to do. So I'm coming from my own experience, and I'll illustrate some of these points. Excuse me. So we're first going to talk about ways that craft can be used as a healing tool. And there's infinite numbers of ways that that can be done. So we're not going to cover all of them. We're just going to cover some of them. And after this section, we'll take a little Q&A break. And if you have any other ideas of your own about how it can be used, comments, questions, I welcome that, because as much as I do have some expertise in this area, I'm not an expert on all things mental health and all things craft. We all have our own expertise, and everybody has their own experiences. So it's really important that we recognize that everybody has something to contribute. And we can all learn from each other no matter where we are in our journeys or our skill levels or any of that. So the first thing that people think about, especially with craft therapy or art therapy, is processing trauma, because that's what people think when they think about therapy, right? Is that you had a problem, you went through something, and you're gonna go to therapy to deal with it. And yeah, that's a lot of it, but sometimes it's not that. However, when it is, it works really well. So using craft to mentally and emotionally process traumatic or difficult experiences. Trauma doesn't have to be some big, like, end of life, your life was threatened thing. It can be small things that traumatize you for a long time. Any situations that have an impact on you can really impact your mental health. So thinking about that, you want to think about what you're trying to get out of your art. So processing trauma is one of the more common ways, but it's also one of the more complex ways to use craft and art. You have to kind of be in a good space already to process trauma. It's really hard to process trauma while you're in trauma, is something I've learned personally. That's why they like you to keep going to therapy after the trauma passes still, because you want to keep building your skills. And it's really hard to learn a new skill when you're in crisis. So processing can sometimes be done at a later time. This piece that I've included is a really old one that I did when I was just finishing university 13 years ago. And it was one of the starts of my mixed media and embroidery work series. So again, working with ideas about processing my self-worth, my idea of my body and aesthetics and beauty standards. And that's something that I've dealt with for a long time. And I worked to try and compose my thoughts and compose my feelings through the art, and then sharing that with other people. So that would be a way to use art to process trauma, would be to really be making art about a specific topic or about an event or about feelings. I'm not going to go into that too much more because it's really individual. It's also something that I tend to recommend you do with somebody who is experienced as a therapist, because obviously processing trauma can be really difficult, and bringing up those feelings can be hard for a lot of people, and having someone with experience that you can reach out to or who is there with you facilitating is always a good plan, I think. However, again, not everybody is going to do that all the time. So the next way that we could use art or craft as a therapeutic tool is as distraction, which is one of my favorite ways of using it. Sometimes everyday life is overwhelming, right? Especially right now. It's unbelievable, the things that are going on right now. So sometimes our brains just go on overload and we cannot functionally deal with everything in our brain, all the anxiety. This is a good tactic for dealing with anxiety, I find. However, what I've written here is it shouldn't be considered a long-term solution, because again, you can only distract from problems for so long. It's not necessarily dealing with them. So this piece in the photograph is actually a piece I'm working on right now. So I started, it's funny because I started this piece 3 years ago, and then I picked it up this week because my brain was on absolute overload, and I needed something that required less cognitive involvement. So this one was already started, my drawing was already started, and what I've started doing is just stitching, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not from there, but stitching along the lines of the fabric and then following and just going with my guts. So I'm not thinking when I do this piece. So I like to say, I'm turning my brain off now. Using this as a tool can be very helpful, but again, distraction comes with, you have to balance. So sometimes we need to address our problems head on, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't have control over our problems or the world or whatever is going on, and we need a little bit of a break from dealing with it. So using craft in ways that can sort of involve your mind and your hands is like, that's why I find craft is one of the best techniques to do this with. Again, I'm partial to embroidery, but it could go out over any sort of craft, woodworking, you know, also ceramics, all sorts of things, jewelry making. You could do when you're keeping your hands busy and your brain really focused, you are having less ability or time to focus on some of the what ifs, the oh God, the world's ending, that one's fine with me, those kinds of things. So distraction is one option, and it's, again, short term. Moving on. So this one is similar to distraction, but actually is still different. So meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness, if you're unfamiliar with that term, is a practice that's used in a lot of therapies, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a common treatment for anxiety, depression, amongst many other mental health issues. So mindfulness is basically a practice that dedicates you to focusing your mind and becoming aware of your surroundings, thoughts, feelings. I can't get too much into it because it's this huge, huge topic, but the internet is full of mindfulness practices and the basics of it. Basically, it's very similar, again, to a meditative state where you're going over things, you're recognizing when thoughts come into your head, but you're not judging them. And this is a skill that's really, I found it really, really hard to learn. But over the years, many years, it's one of those things where the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And then you start using it without realizing. So when you can sit in quiet with your thoughts and sort of be like, oh, there's a thought, I'm feeling hungry, go back to your meditative. And it's a whole process. So I'm not explaining that very well, I'm sorry. But it is very, very fitting for craft, because a lot of craft uses repetitive tasks and routines, techniques that you do over and over again and practice. And the better you get at them, the less you have to pay attention. So things like embroidery give us that chance. So my piece on the side here is a detail of one of my cross-stitch pieces where I have planned out my piece ahead of time. At the very beginning of making a piece with cross-stitch, I create a chart with all the colors, and it's a legend. So it's almost like a paint by number, right? And that gives me the freedom, once it's created, to just follow. And the reason I started cross-stitching when I was 14 years old, and I just fell in love with it, and something in my brain really clicked with it. And I didn't realize until I was an adult that a lot of it is because I really thrive on repetition and routine, where I can do the same thing. I don't have to stress about making decisions every step of the way. And so those types of things can be really beneficial if you're needing a sense of calm, if you're needing to sort of mellow down a little bit. However, it can work in the opposite way, right? Some people cannot do repetitive routines over and over again, especially ones that require fine detail work or focus. If you have ADHD or attention deficit issues, that can be really challenging. So recognizing some of our strengths is important to choosing a practice, and also being willing to tolerate some discomfort is also important. But again, recognizing what challenges we're willing to face and deal with. There's a lot of challenges right now, and maybe craft isn't the one that you need to deal with right this second when there's so much other things going on. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the second half, about picking and choosing things that to adapt to our current circumstances anyway, choosing practices. So hopefully we're getting somewhere and covering things. I'll keep going. Here's a picture of my dog. So yeah, one of the other things I like to talk about is this sense of productivity and mastery. When I talk to or when I work with youths, I talk a lot about a sense of mastery, which sounds really silly and sort of highfalutin. But what I mean by that is basically being good at something. Being good at something is really good for our self-esteem. And not everybody can be good at everything. Obviously, that's not something that we can manage. But learning a technical skill has a easier entry point, I find. So craft there's usually, again, different levels that you can access based on whether you're a beginner or intermediate or advanced practitioner, is the word. Right now, especially with the pandemic, I know a lot of people are feeling like they're not doing anything. I certainly wasn't, and I felt like, I mean, I'm used to staying home. I actually work from home most of the time, and I still felt like I wasn't doing anything. There was so much going on, and I couldn't contribute, I felt, and making something tangible, especially with your hands, out of scratch sometimes, is really meaningful. It can really help us to feel that we've accomplished something. It can be functional. Again, I would argue that all art is functional, but we won't get into that debate. We'll keep it with, I kept sewing. I started sewing more over this lockdown period because I found that some of the art that I was trying to make felt like I just was in la la land and I didn't have a purpose for it and I didn't know what I was doing. And so I switched over to sewing. And I did sew some masks for family and friends, which is wonderful, but I also found that was hard on my brain. And I instead turned to sewing hoodies for my dog and sewing t-shirts for my partner and leggings and things that I could use every day, and building up that level of skill because it required a different, again, talking about me personally, my personal needs are to disconnect. And so to not have to think about the things that I think about 24 hours a day, right? So to sew, me personally, I'm following a pattern. So I'm following instructions, I'm putting my pieces together. I talk about how it's like a puzzle. And then at the end, you finish your puzzle. Good job. And it's great. So I talk a lot about that as a skill because sometimes we don't realize that we may feel worthless even, that we don't have skills or that we don't have worth or value, and not saying that you should find that in tangible objects. That is not your worth. Your worth is not your skill level or your productivity, but sometimes that can help us to feel and to get through some of those feelings that are difficult. All right, so this is Walter in his homemade hoodie. Another one that I personally had to deal with a long time ago is recognition and acknowledgement. And I talk about this one because so many people think that wanting to hear good things about ourselves is selfish. And it's not. We thrive on validation. And it is a problem when we can't validate ourselves except for through external validation. When you get so wrapped up in what other people think that you can't honor your own feelings about something, that's troublesome. However, wanting to share your work and, you know, getting to hear feedback is beneficial. Again, it's gonna to connect you to other people, which is a next slide. But it also, again, shares something about yourself, your skills, your work, your passions, and that's really, I think, important to us as humans. So I've included this little screenshot from my Instagram where people are saying lovely things about my work, and I came to terms with the fact that I thrive on recognition as an artist. This is not that strange. I do, and I have to keep it in check. But it's something that I have learned to recognize about myself without judgment as well, is that this is part of who I am. I like to share what I do with others, and I like to hear what they think. And that sometimes means that they will tell me that they do not like it. And that is something that I have to deal with as well. So if you're in a fragile state, it's probably not best to post your art somewhere on the interwebs where everybody in the whole world can tell you whatever they think about it. Because sometimes people on the interwebs are not very nice. But there are lots of places where you can gather with like-minded individuals who are there to support each other and to help people gain skills and confidence and all sorts of things. So I found Facebook has been a really great place for me. I started joining embroidery groups years and years ago on Facebook and sharing my work there. And that, again, gave me some of the confidence to start working on a larger scale and applying for more things and making connections to new people in shows and all sorts of things like that. So recognizing that validation and feeling good about ourselves isn't a negative, and it's not a self-centered idea, but also, again, trying to keep it in perspective. Strengths building. I think I mentioned this a little bit maybe already. So it's the idea of strengths building is a term that people use in therapeutic practice a lot, and it encompasses building skills, basically life skills, and it's a very broad term. So pretty much anything could really be considered strengths building, but a lot of them are things like learning how to emotionally regulate, or how to manage failure, which is a really, really good thing that craft can do for you, because it's hard, and it's hard to learn something and you make mistakes. And at the end, you may have a perfect thing, you may not have a perfect thing. Like, we all go through the process of learning, and some people are faster at learning than others at certain things, but it's very rare to find someone who is just amazingly perfect at something the first time they try it. So there is that skill building process that we have to go through, and combating perfectionism is part of that as well. So as craft artists, I don't know about you, but perfectionism is very common, and it's one of my major flaws that I had to get over. I certainly haven't entirely, but I've worked on it for a long time. Art therapy was really helpful for me for that, because I found that art school kind of taught me to be really perfectionistic, and art therapy school taught me to be completely non-perfectionistic, because it's like, you know what, if you make anything, that's great. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to look great, it doesn't have to be great, you don't have to do anything with it, you could throw it in the garbage, it doesn't matter. It's the process of doing it. So sometimes, again, you may not feel that way. I like to keep my art afterwards. I like it to look nice. But recognizing that the value of art isn't in the final product necessarily, I don't think it is anyway, is an important part of using craft and art therapeutically. It's really hard to get a therapeutic benefit out of art or craft when you are holding yourself to standards that are either unachievable or unrealistic. And honestly, that would technically probably set you back further if you're expecting to be perfect at something or expecting to be really good at something, especially when you're just learning something. That can really challenge our perceptions of our self-worth again. So if that's something that you struggle with already, self-worth and idea, your sense of self-esteem or value, starting a new craft that you have just never done before might be hard. It might be too challenging to do right now when things are really tough. You might want to look back to something that you already have some skills in, that you've, you know, practiced a little bit, that you have some mastery in, so that you're not setting yourself up for failure, basically. This piece, this art piece in this picture is from one of the events that I did with the Yes, where youth from all around the city were at an event for services, and they were all allowed to work on this piece together. And that was a real challenge for people, because again, when you put time and effort into something and then someone comes and paints over it, that's hard. That's hard to deal with. And so again, learning to let go, learning to work together, learning to, it can be more practical, more very basic, learning how to sew, learning how to cook, learning to be more compassionate with yourself. Again, to look at something and say, you know, I tried really hard on that and it doesn't look perfect, but it's perfect to me because, again, I did the best I could, and that's compassion. So all of these strengths can be built through craft, through different ways, whether it's, again, working together with somebody, or whether it's learning a new technique, or whether it's perfecting, in air quotes, a technique that you've already practiced for a long time. There's lots of ways that craft can be used to build strengths that can help you through mental health, or help you on your way to mental wellness, if we'll put it that way. Oh, right. Sorry. I hope I'm not running too late. Okay. I'll talk faster. So this one, where am I? I have to move my board. Connection is one of the other things that craft can do for us. So we often think about crafting as a solitary activity. A lot of people are introverts who craft, but there's huge, I mean, obviously everybody knows, or most people know about Stitch and Bitches or craft meetups or all those types of things. And they've been going on for centuries, I'm sure. So this isn't a new idea. Craft can connect people. And especially now that we are restricted or limited in the ways that we can meet together and work together, we have to be a little bit more adaptive and start thinking of new ways to connect to other people and through new channels. So digital connection, there's lots of new ways and old ways still available to connect online. Social media is great. I'm a millennial, so I like to espouse the benefits of social media. Again, there's also some cons, but there's a lot of spaces on social media for sharing and connecting with other people. So this is a screenshot. You can Google embroidery, or not Google, you can look up embroidery groups on Facebook, and there's so many, and there's so many different themes. I'm in a lot of different ones that are, you know, a little bit more adventurous, because that's the kind of embroidery I like to do. But there's tons of different themes and different places for people to connect, and that I think can be really helpful at this time. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So great, halfway point, almost on time. If you have any other ideas or comments or questions at this point, if you have ways that you are using art or craft in a way to heal or to help with mental wellness, I welcome you to share, because again, everybody has something to contribute. So Saskia, I think,
mentioned there, Edward de Bono has books about creativity and how to think about creativity and imagination. Edward de Bono, as in U2, Bono.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Not like Bono for Me Too. The last name is spelled B-O-N.
Oh, okay, I was like, it's actually Bono? Not a big fan, no. But that's fine. All right, so moving on, friends. This is the real fun part. So we've kind of addressed some of these things already, but we'll go into them. I see you yawning, Stephanie. I'm joking. Stephanie is a friend of mine. I feel like I was allowed to say that. Sorry. I will not call out anyone else for yawning. I promise. So addressing some of the challenges that we face as crafters and artists during this pandemic. The lack of motivation that we were just talking about is a really, really common one that I've been hearing from a lot of people. And being gentle with ourselves, again, is my common theme throughout this entire presentation, is being gentle. To expect that we're creating at the same level, or at the same speed or anything that we were doing 3 months ago or 4 months ago is unrealistic, because the world isn't the same as it was 4 months ago. And we have so many more things that we're dealing with now. So I included Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, which is like super therapy schoolish of me, but I only really I'm not gonna like talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs because that's not my forte. But what I wanted to use it to illustrate was that sometimes our craft practice is focused on a need that is higher than what we are dealing with. So a lot of our art has to deal with, these top ones of self-actualization and esteem, of sharing our stories, of creating something, of being a master at our craft, of all of these different things. And right now, we're kind of all down on safety needs and maybe in love and belonging. Most people during trauma are, again, we've moved into a world where our sense of safety is jeopardized, where we're not feeling like ourselves anymore, where we're not sure, everything we know has changed. And trying to work on your self-actualization while you don't feel safe is going to be really, really challenging. So what I am recommending, and what I've done for myself, is to knock my practice down a little bit, is that I'm not necessarily focusing on the high cognitive conceptual sides of my art that I like to do, and I do like to do that, but I'm focusing more on making myself feel safe and making myself feel connected to other people, because those are the things that I'm struggling with right now. So safety, finding safety in your art. So that's like, feel like I need to clarify that a bit. So a way to find safety in your art would be to focusing, to do that mindfulness practice where you're focusing on your surroundings, on your grounding your body, your, hearing your breath, you're repeatedly doing something that causes, helps you to feel calm. So those types of things need to almost be done before you can get to the higher levels. And again, that's not always going to be the case, but for the most part. So if you're struggling to start a project or finish a project or whatever it is that you're doing, consider what it is that your needs are, if you can reflect on that and say, how am I feeling? Am I feeling, safe? Am I feeling connected? Am I feeling valuable, valid? And if you're losing some of, or if you're missing some of those things, adapting your art practice to try and fill those needs or focus on them more so than some of the higher, receiving validation or becoming the best version of yourself, right? Which is self-actualization, can be put on hold for a little bit. So for me, this looks like that piece that I said was in progress, the embroidery piece with the nude. I'm doing something that requires almost no thinking. And I have zero expectations of what this piece will end up like. It may look terrible. I have no plan for it to go in a show yet. I'm just gonna do whatever I feel like doing because that's what I need to do right now. I need to keep my hands and my brain busy. And focusing on those things helps us to sort of balance out a little bit. So I hope that makes sense. If not, we can always revisit. So another challenge that a lot of people are facing right now is life overlap. I struggled with what to call this. Basically that thing that we're doing everything right now. People are parenting, they are educating their kids, they're taking care of, you know, other family members or pets, they're working from home and trying to make art or craft all at the same time. Like we're not superhumans, right? The expectations that we have of ourselves are so high for this situation where we have been thrown into this situation that we could never have expected. Nobody has prepared for this. I don't know anybody who is prepared to teach their children from home on the fly for months whilst working and also doing all these other things. And again, self-compassion, we have to work on recognizing that it's okay to not be perfect at all of these things. It's okay to do things to the good enough standard, I call it. I used to have a real problem with, again, I mentioned that, with perfectionism, with saying, well, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to do it at all. And I work with my own therapist on this issue still, is that sometimes good enough is better than not at all. And again, sometimes that's not true, but we won't talk about the exceptions for the most part. 80% is still better than 0%, or 10% is better than 0%. And the practice of doing this can really, you know, help us in other aspects of our life to be more compassionate to ourselves and others. I find that with a lot of the people I talk to, again, you always hear your harshest critic is yourself, right? That we're often expecting far more of ourselves than we would of our friends or our peers, and recognizing that, you know, being a perfect artist and creating a piece a week or whatever it is during this time is just not reasonable. Adaptation, sorry, I said that weird. To these circumstances is a way that you can deal with some of the challenges of life overlap. So as we had mentioned before, creating Zoom ways over Zoom of connecting to other people, or involving arts and crafts with your caregiving or education practices. One of the ones I say is it's not always possible, I recognize, for people that may not have a fellow peer in their life to help, but ensuring that you take breaks and have backup plans to allow for self-care, I think is really important. But I know that, again, if you're a single parent, there may not be someone else to take care of the kiddo right now. So trying to build those into a schedule, into a plan to work with the things that you already have to do in your life could be a way of mitigating and managing some of these things, and still fitting in some crafts and craft practice into our everyday lives right now, which can benefit, again, all sorts of the people in our lives as well. So the kiddos and parents and grandparents and peers and all sorts of things. You can always, again, it's not right for everybody, but it can certainly help. So isolation and loneliness is obviously one of the big problems with this lockdown. I have some friends that live alone, and it's been really difficult for them, and I can't imagine trying to make it through this without my partner. So I recognize that could be really hard. And crafters, we tend to think of as introverts, but that's not always the case. It's again, not correlated in any way. So we still need human contact regardless of whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Again, I haven't personally been struggling with isolation, but many people have, and it's a real thing. So what I've mentioned before is the social media. Again, I find that those connections to other people over also, like, it's not just people in Edmonton either, right? We have people from Melbourne here, which is amazing. And like, you can connect to people from all over the place in different interests and different experiences, or similar interests and experiences. So the internet is a scary place, but cool place, because there are lots of spaces being created for people to share. So the other idea, as I had mentioned, was creating more virtual craft meetups, art swaps, which I think is a really good idea. I was starting to post, I ran out of thread of a color early on in the lockdown and started posting on my Facebook being like, does anybody have this thread color? I don't want to go to Michael's for one thread. It didn't happen. Nobody had it, but it's okay. I made it through the project. But there's lots of ways that we can get creative about connecting with other people. So obviously this Monday meetup is one of them. The Craft Council has been really great at, again, bringing like-minded people together in a space to share, to connect, to chat, to not necessarily have to learn, although today I hope it's not just learning, but meeting on different levels is important. And so whether maybe you're not digitally inclined, and as we slowly start opening up, we may start looking into, again, other options of socially distanced meetups or whatever it may be. But we have to adapt, and it may be temporary or it may be not, and I don't know. But I think all of these are good, because even at the end, air quotes again, the end of all of this, there's still going to be people who have accessibility needs, who have been left out in the past. So these types of virtual and alternative connecting spaces give more people ways to connect, and I think that's really valuable. So I look forward. I hope to talk to maybe Jenna about some ideas of sort of ways that this could become something as well, because I think any sort of connection is important, and feeling like you are part of something is important to us. It's, again, you saw it on that Maslow hierarchy of needs. Belonging is one of the main tiers. If we don't feel like we're a part of something, it's really, really hard to feel, to get up to our self-esteem, to work on our self-worth and our becoming the person. It's not impossible. I will never say that, but it's challenging. So I hope that we can get creative with the ways that we work together. And I think that there's mail art. Lots of people used to do trading card art. That's really cool. I'd love to do craft swaps. Yeah, so accessibility is also one of the things that I like to harp on about everything all the time. So during the lockdown, obviously, many people are struggling to access some of the things that they would be able to do that would make it possible to do crafts. Sorry, I couldn't structure that sentence. So materials, tools and equipment, technology, instruction. Some people don't know how. Some people don't have laptops. Some people don't have internet access. All of those kinds of things make it challenging to connect and to craft. So I don't have answers necessarily for that. I do know that lots of people are working on them. So the Community Mental Health Action Plan that I work with part-time has recognized that technology, especially for students, is a big issue right now, and they're working on doing laptop drives to give to students who don't have access to a computer, and TELUS is donating some internet services, and they're working on those kinds of things. So that can be done in other spaces. Technology is something that we replace over and over and over again. Lots of people, I have like at least 2 iPhones in my house that are old. So again, trying to figure out what we can do with those and get them to people that need them is a good way of doing things. Creating groups or relationships that support each other. So like I was saying, materials swaps, shopping buddies. I had people that offered to go out and buy me thread when I couldn't find that thread. Somebody was like, hey, I'll get it for you. And I was like, oh, thank you. Like, that's really nice. Sharing access to tools and equipment. So if you have a saw, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what things that don't have to do with embroidery. Some of that equipment is really expensive, or, you know, where we would have accessed it in a public space or studio, we may not be able to do that anymore. So if you can organize some way to share access with someone else, you can swap it without contact, you can wipe it down, all sorts of things like that. We can start thinking about different ways, and collaborating with other people as well. So one of the things I was thinking about when I wrote this was, if somebody is really needing materials but doesn't have, you know, the spoons in spoon theory, if anybody knows what that is, sorry, the capacity, the mental capacity to set up a material swap themselves, because that maybe they don't have the extrovertedness, the outgoingness, or the capacity to do all that work. Maybe somebody else who's struggling with isolation could partner with somebody who's struggling with materials, and they could work together to build a swap and meet multiple needs at the same time. So those types of ideas where we're working together. Creating more digital instruction and spaces for people to create. So I used to facilitate a bi-monthly meetup for LGBTQIA2S+ youth to make art. And I've passed that on to the youth to facilitate now. And I was thinking about how I would have facilitated that now in the lockdown. So I, again, as our friend from Melbourne was saying, I assume from the accent, I guess I shouldn't have assumed, was saying that she's doing Zoom education or art work with youth, their children. Those types of things are really, really beneficial to people. There's craft instruction videos on YouTube. There's Pinterest has 8 gajillion ideas of things that we could or could not make sometimes. Again, Pinterest fails are also lovely, so entertaining content. But there's also a website called Skillshare, which is a subscription service, so it does cost money, and you can probably find most of the same things on YouTube for free. But it has all sorts of tutorial videos about everything you can ever possibly think of. And I did their free trial for a month and looked at all of the videos for hand lettering, because that was something I was interested in. And like, it's really cool. So there's lots of ways out there to start sharing in new ways. Lastly, our finances obviously might be a real barrier to people, especially right now, as the pandemic has really increased financial instability for people. As I mentioned, if you have extra art supplies or crafting supplies, consider donating them to a swap group. The reuse center here in Edmonton is a really good place. I don't know if they're open right now or accepting donations, but I hope they will be soon. And other shelters and youth groups, the Yes, Terra Center, places like that. There's lots and lots of nonprofits that struggle to purchase art supplies to provide their clients with those types of things. So if you have a basement full and feel like doing some spring cleaning, it's a great time. Or start your own library and start lending things out to people. Again, there's a lot of considerations here, but it certainly can be done. So I hope that's something that we can certainly find more solutions to. So we'll move in on time-ish to the final question and answer period. So if you have more questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll moderate or mediate or whatever the word is. And thank you, Saskia. Can ask questions if you don't want to ask them yourselves. Oh, and I apparently, oops, sorry, cut off this last sentence, but what I was saying was, please don't share any personal details that people ask or share outside of this webinar. We're not going to record the question period. Thank you. Brain just went off. So that if resources that I gathered at the end just to help, I should have included one on mindfulness now I realize, so sorry. Maybe I'll add that in when we send it out. But there's some good articles about craft and mental health. The Canada Craft Federation has a whole like list of financial resources for artists and crafters. If you're in crisis, the top 2 phone numbers are local and Alberta helplines. Please reach out. 211 as well has all sorts of different service and supports navigations now throughout Alberta. So if you're seeking, if you need help, please reach out. We value you. Specifically, every one of you have a lot of meaning, and we need you around. So I hope that helps. I really am thankful for all of you for being here and for having this conversation, because honestly, mental health hasn't come up enough, and crafting can be a way that we can really deal with it deal with it partly in a accessible way for a lot of people. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Allison. That was really wonderful to have you, and you're such a thoughtful and generous person, and I know that you put a lot of work into preparing this for everyone, and I just appreciate that really deeply. I think mental health is something that affects us all, and myself included, so these resources are really great, and I do want to echo that if people are in need, please do reach out, and we'll try to help you in any way we can or point you in the direction that we can. We will send out this presentation. We will get Allison to add her favorite link for mindfulness to that. And we'll also have asked Allison to curate a few of these links for us for the Alberta Craft Council website. So we'll put those in resources as well. Thank you so much to all of you who attended, to Fiona for joining us all the way from Melbourne. Amazing. We're part of such a deep, connected craft community all over the world, and I think there's people out there that we can find to connect with all over the place. And that's going to leave me with a little segue. We have a project coming up for a fundraiser for the Craft Council, and also 50% of the retail value goes to the collaborating artists. So we are doing craft collaborations. You have till the end of May to submit whether you'd like to submit as an individual, and we'll match you up with someone else, or if there's someone you're already excited to collaborate with, definitely go on our website or social media and find the link to apply to do that, and maybe connect with someone you've never met before. We're looking at deepening those connections, even while we can only connect virtually, and look forward to connecting to everyone in person again soon. If any of you attending have ideas for future Monday meetups or presenters, definitely let us know. You can reach out to us on social email, or our emails are all social media or email. Both those things will work. And then Allison, I just wanted to ask you too, do you have any upcoming exhibitions or programs or anything you want to plug?
I don't.
No.
Yeah, I'm like, what am I doing? I'm working, I'm starting a big project. I'm very slowly starting it, actually, because of the pandemic. I haven't done as much work. So I have some things in exhibitions right now, but they've all been put on hold. So I have no updates at this time being, but I hope to to see people again eventually.
Yes, we will all see each other again, definitely virtually and hopefully very soon in person. So thank you again to Allison. Thank you to all of you who joined. Thank you to the people who were able to contribute a donation that went towards Allison's honorarium and future programming. We really appreciate it, all your time and effort into this, Allison. Thank you.
Well, thank you again. I had a blast, and I hope that was helpful.
I hope so too. I think it was.
All right. Well, take
Great.
care, everyone, and yeah, we'll see you next time, I guess.
Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone.